Okay, so today we're diving deep into something pretty amazing, the living world.
The living world.
We've got some really cool material to work with that I think lays it all out there, like what it is and why you should even care. So by the end of this, our goal is for everyone to really understand what makes up this living world, why all the variety in it matters, and where we as humans fit into all of it.
Okay.
The sources we're looking at today kind of give us this big, broad view. We're talking tiny ecosystems all the way up to global conservation efforts.
Oh, wow.
And to really get us going, just think about this for a sec. Scientists estimate there are 8.7 million species on Earth. That's a lot of species.
Yeah.
But we've only identified like 1.2 million of them.
Wow.
I mean, doesn't that just make you wonder what else is out there? Like, what haven't we found yet?
Oh, for sure. It really makes you think about all the different roles that those undiscovered species play.
Right.
And it kind of highlights this important point right from the start.
Yeah.
When we talk about the living world, we're not just talking about, like, a bunch of animals and plants,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
It's way more than that. It's like this massively interconnected web of life. You can also think of it like Earth is this giant puzzle, right?
Oh, okay. I like that.
Yeah, and each species, even the teeny tiny ones that you might not even think about, they're all a vital piece of that puzzle. They all have a role to play. And that leads us to this concept of biodiversity, which is basically like the variety of life at every level,
Okay.
from those tiny little microbes all the way up to the biggest whales and everything in between.
So it's not just about how many different species there are.
Right. It's not just a numbers game. It's about the genetic differences within those populations, the variety of ecosystems. It all contributes to biodiversity.
Yeah.
And that variety is crucial.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just a nice thing to have. It's fundamental to how well our planet actually functions.
Yeah. That makes sense. The sources we're looking at today really emphasize that, like, this biodiversity, this variety, it's directly connected to how tough, how resilient ecosystems are. Can you kind of paint a picture of why that connection's so important?
Oh, absolutely. Let's imagine for a second a field of wheat, just one type of wheat. You know, if some new disease comes along and that wheat is vulnerable, the whole crop could be wiped out just like that.
Yeah.
But imagine a natural grassland with loads of different grasses and plants. If a disease comes along, maybe it affects one species, but the others can still thrive, right? They're not all going to be vulnerable to the same thing.
Right.
So the overall health and stability of that ecosystem are maintained.
Because of the variety.
Exactly. That's the power of biodiversity. It's like a safety net. It lets ecosystems handle disturbances, whether it's a natural disaster or something caused by us, by humans. It's almost like having multiple backup systems.
Okay. Backup systems for the planet. Got it. And one of the sources actually has this great quote from E.O. Wilson. He's a pretty well-known biologist. And he says, "Destroying rainforests for profit is like burning a Renaissance painting to cook a meal."
Wow. Yeah, that's a powerful way to put it.
Right. When you hear it like that, it makes you really think about the value of what we're losing.
It really does. It highlights how short-sighted we can be when we're only thinking about immediate gains, without thinking about the bigger picture, the long-term consequences. We could be losing so much potential medicines, all sorts of biological processes we haven't even discovered yet. The complexity of these environments, we risk losing all that forever.
Yeah, and it's not like we can just paint another Renaissance painting.
Exactly.
Okay, so we're starting to see this big picture, this vast and interconnected living world where variety is key, where that biodiversity keeps everything in balance.
Keeps it resilient.
Resilient, exactly. So let's zoom in a bit. Our sources highlight coral reefs as, like, the rainforests of the sea, which is a pretty cool way to think about them.
It is. What's so incredible about coral reefs is that they're just bursting with life, so much activity in a relatively small space. They cover less than 1% of the ocean floor, but something like 25% of all marine species live there.
It's a huge chunk.
It is.
Right.
Think about that. A quarter of all ocean life depends on these structures. They're not just, pretty underwater scenery. They're nurseries, feeding grounds. They provide shelter for countless fish and all these organisms that eventually affect the whole ocean ecosystem. They even play a role in what we eat.
Wow, okay. But, we often hear about the threats to coral reefs, coral bleaching especially. What's going on there, and why should we be concerned?
This is really critical. It's tied directly to climate change and the rising ocean temperatures that come with that. You see, corals have this partnership, a symbiotic relationship with these tiny algae called zooxanthellae.
Zooxanthellae.
Yeah, try saying that 3 times fast.
No thanks.
These little algae live inside the coral tissue. and they're essential. They provide the coral with food, with nutrients, through photosynthesis.
Okay.
But when the water gets too warm, the coral gets stressed and basically kicks out these algae. And that
Oh,
causes the coral to turn white. That's the bleaching. And if it's really bad, if it lasts too long, the coral can actually die. And that can lead to the whole reef ecosystem collapsing.
so it's not just that the coral dies.
Right. It has this domino effect. The marine life that depends on the reef, the protection the reef offers to coastlines against storms, even the people whose livelihoods depend on the reef for fishing or tourism, they're all affected.
So it's a global issue then.
Yeah. It shows how changes in one part of the world can have ripple effects everywhere, even if you live far from the coast.
That's a good point. Okay, let's move on to another amazing ecosystem our sources talk about, the Amazon rainforest.
Ah, yes. The Amazon.
They call it a biodiversity powerhouse. What makes this area so important to us?
Well, the scale of the Amazon is just mind-blowing. Imagine 400 billion trees, like individual trees,
Whoa.
and around 3 million different species living there. To put that into perspective, that's a huge chunk of all the plant and animal life we know about on the entire planet, all concentrated in this one area.
And it's not just about how many species are there.
Right. Beyond the biodiversity, the Amazon is crucial for regulating the world's climate. And one of our sources even pointed out that it produces around 20% of the oxygen in Earth's atmosphere.
Seriously?
Yeah, so every breath you take, you can partly thank the Amazon for that.
Wow, that really hits home. But we also hear a lot about deforestation in the Amazon. One of our sources said an area the size of a football field is lost every second. Every second.
It's terrifying, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Why should this level of destruction matter to, the average person?
Well, when we lose that much rainforest that quickly, the consequences are massive. First, you're talking about an incredible loss of habitat. Countless species are pushed closer to extinction, and the planet's biodiversity takes another hit.
Right.
Second, all the carbon that's stored in those trees is released into the atmosphere when they're cut down. And that, of course, contributes to climate change.
Which affects everyone.
Exactly. But there's another really important aspect that our sources highlight, the potential for medical breakthroughs. Rainforests are like nature's pharmacies. They're full of undiscovered compounds.
Yeah.
One of the sources gave the example of substances found in frogs that are being used as painkillers.
Really?
Yeah. By destroying these ecosystems, we could be losing the key to treating diseases we don't even know about yet. It's like ripping pages out of a medical textbook before we've even had a chance to read them.
Oh, man. That's a good analogy. It makes you think, doesn't it? About the short-term gain versus the long-term loss. Okay, so we've looked at what the living world is, why biodiversity is so critical, and we've focused on some pretty vital ecosystems like coral reefs and the Amazon. But now, let's talk about us.
Us.
Yeah, humans. Where do we fit into all of this? Our sources suggest we're both the problem and potentially the solution. Let's start with the impact we're having.
Well, the evidence is pretty clear that human activities are having a big and mostly negative impact on the living world. Things like industrial-scale agriculture, all the pollution we create in our air and water, and of course, climate change. All of that leads to habitat destruction, to ecosystems breaking down, and a huge increase in how fast species are going extinct. One source even said that current extinction rates are 1,000 times higher than the natural rate.
1,000 times.
Yeah, that's a pretty sobering number. And it really underlines how serious this biodiversity crisis is, a crisis that we are fueling.
Yeah, that is pretty alarming. But like our sources point out, we're not just the bad guys here. We have the potential to be the solution too, right?
Absolutely. What's really inspiring is seeing examples of where conservation efforts have worked, where we've made a difference. Costa Rica is a great example.
Costa Rica.
Yeah, they went through a period of pretty serious deforestation. But then they made this conscious decision to put environmental protection first.
How'd they do that?
They changed their government policies. They started focusing on ecotourism, basically showing people how amazing their natural environment is.
All right.
Was. And as a result, their forest cover has actually increased to over 50%.
More than half the country is covered in forest.
Yeah. It proves that we can actually reverse the damage, if we're committed to it.
That's encouraging. And our sources also talk about how humpback whale populations have bounced back after those international hunting bans.
Oh, yeah. That's a fantastic example of how even a species that was on the very edge of extinction can recover if we take the right steps.
It's a good reminder that we can actually make a difference. So that leads to, what can we, the listeners, actually do? Our sources are pretty clear. They're calling for action. What are some real, concrete things that we can all do to help protect this living world?
Well, our sources offer some really practical advice. One important area is supporting businesses that are sustainable. By choosing products from companies that care about the environment, about ethical practices, you're sending a message.
Voting with your wallet.
Exactly. And reducing how much plastic you use is huge. Plastic pollution is a disaster for ecosystems, especially the oceans. And finally, becoming an advocate for policies that protect the environment. That could mean contacting your elected officials or supporting organizations doing good work in this area. It can really help drive bigger systemic change.
So it's like individual actions combined with pushing for bigger changes.
Exactly.
Our sources really stress that protecting nature isn't just some abstract idea. It's about ensuring a healthy future for all of us.
Absolutely. The health of the living world directly impacts our lives. The air we breathe, the water we drink, the food we eat, our well-being is tied to it. Recognizing that connection is the first step.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the living world, let's quickly recap. We talked about how interconnected life is and how crucial biodiversity is. We zoomed in on some pretty incredible ecosystems, coral reefs, the Amazon rainforest, and talked about their value and the threats they face. And we wrapped up by talking about the human impact, both good and bad, and how it can be a force for positive change.
I think that's a great summary.
And just to leave you with something to ponder, think about the amazing, complex connections in nature, connections that we often don't even see, like how might the health of the soil in, say, France affect birds migrating to, like, South Africa?
That's a great question.
Or how could changes in ocean currents affect the weather where you live? Even small changes can have these ripple effects. What small habit could you change in your life? Maybe it's reducing food waste or planting native plants in your garden.
Those are all great ideas.
And just think about the effects, the seen and unseen, that those small actions might have on the amazing web of life around us.
It's all connected.
It really is.
What unexpected connections might your actions influence?
That's a great question. And on that note, we'll wrap things up. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the living world. Until next time.
Bye for now.